midlife who are struggling with low energy and fatigue. And so, what I do is I help them identify what is causing their fatigue so they can address it and then be able to move on so they can be more present in their lives at home and at work. So, today we're going to talk about coffee, why coffee isn't working anymore, and what your body is actually trying to tell you. So, if you're watching live, go ahead and let me know where you're watching from and let me know if there's anything you're interested in learning today. So, we know there are several things that we know in regards to what is happening in a woman's body during perimenopause. And this live is definitely for those my friends who love their cup of coffee, but they've noticed that that cup of coffee isn't keeping them as energized as it used to. So what happens is they'll have their cup of coffee before in their 20s and 30s. That coffee could give them that energy boost they needed and they could run all day. But now what's happening is they're having energy crashes at 10 and or 11 o'clock. So today's live is going to address those morning crashes. Tomorrow's live, we're going to talk about what is causing the evening crashes. So as I was saying, during perimenopause, our bodies are going through a significant transition. And during this transition, our bodies are more insulin resistant. This means that our bodies aren't responding to the same amount of insulin release that it used to before. So let me just give you a quick overview. So anytime we eat something, regardless of what it is, our body is going to break it down into the simplest form, which is glucose. Why? Well, our brains need glucose, and that's pretty much the only thing that our brains can use to function. So the body's going to break it down, and if we have excess, what it does is it'll store it in our liver in the form of glucagon. So back from that, but what happens is anytime we eat anything, right, our body breaks it down, and then the nutrients will sit in our blood vessels in the bloodstream. So what happens is when this happens, the body knows, and so it'll release insulin. So think of insulin as a key and there's a door. So in order for our cells to be able to take the nutrients and the glucose into their cells where they use it to give us energy, insulin needs to be functioning. So, what happens when we're transitioning into perimenopause is that response is not as efficient as it was before. And so, what will happen is the glucose will sit uh, in our blood vessels longer than before, and then our body then has to produce twice as much insulin to get the cells to open up and then take the glucose and nutrients into the cell, which is how 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 insulin works and how our cells get the nutrients they need to help us be alert, to repair all of those things. So, what happens when a woman who is in perimenopause or midlife grabs that cup of coffee? It doesn't hit the same, right? Because what happens is when we drink coffee, what it does is it boosts our cortisol, and our cortisol levels will trigger the breakdown of glucagon into glucose, and that releases glucose, and that provides the energy for our cells. But if you are not, since our cells aren't as sensitive to insulin, more insulin has to be produced. The glucose is sitting in our blood for longer than it should, and this is what causes those crashes, right? So it's important to know that yes, coffee is helpful, but when you are entering perimenopause, our bodies need more tender loving care. So most women are like, well, does this mean I can't have coffee? No, it doesn't. But during perimenopause, it is very important that we eat foods that help balance out the absorption of glucose into our cells. And so that's by adding protein, or eating something that has protein and healthy fats. So what this does is it slows the release of glucose into our body and our cells after we eat. And so you don't get that crash and then spike. So for the ladies who are like, hey, does this mean I can't have my coffee? No. So during perimenopause, again, we have to change our strategy. So we have to make sure that we're eating something that is high in protein, and I would say 25 to 30 grams of protein, and then also has some healthy fats because that slows down the release of the sugar into the bloodstream. And so when we drink coffee, that's what's triggered. When we drink a cup of coffee, or if you have the coffee, let's say for the ladies that like black coffee, definitely not good. Make sure again you're eating something protein rich with some healthy fats to help slow the rising and falling of the blood sugar levels after you eat so that you don't get that crash. And then on the other side, so for the ladies that like to have all the things in their coffee, all of that additional sugar is definitely causing the crashes that you're experiencing because all of that extra sugar, in addition to the caffeine and the coffee, is just raising your blood sugar even quicker. So again, you can have the coffee, but just make sure that you're eating beforehand and making sure whatever you're eating has 30 or 25 to 30 grams of protein, and then making sure you add some healthy fats. Again, the this slows your blood sugar, this stabilizes your blood sugar level. So it slows the release of glucose into the blood after you've eaten. So that is an important thing to remember. So you can have your coffee, but remember perimenopause is a transitional stage where the body is going through all different types of changes because estrogen is not functioning the way that it used to. So in your 20s and 30s, you had more estrogen. Estrogen actually makes your cells more sensitive to insulin. So during your 20s and 30s, you had insulin there, I mean, estrogen there to help your body and your cells be more sensitive. Now, during perimenopause, where you have the wild fluctuations of estrogen, we no longer have that protective mechanism. And so we need to, and we can support ourselves by making sure we are eating something that has 30, 35 grams of protein and also adding those healthy fats. So we just have to support the body a little bit more because the protective effects and mechanisms of estrogen are no longer there. So, so the issue during perimenopause is that, or midlife, is that we are more likely to have blood sugar dysregulation, which means that we are not as sensitive to insulin, and that causes issues, especially when it comes to what we're eating, and definitely if you're having coffee in the morning. Okay, so again, protein is important. It slows the release of glucose into our blood and into our cells. So it's definitely important to support that there. And I also wanted to talk about or mention my Get My Spark Back event that's going to be hosted on Tuesday, April the 28th, where we'll gather together. You can bring your questions. My quiz will be launching. You can take my quiz and it'll tell you what is your primary what is the primary cause of your fatigue. So we know during perimenopause, there are multiple causes, but we're going to touch on the quiz is going to let you identify what is the primary cause of fatigue for you so you can address it and then move on and address any other causes if they're there. So if you've learned anything from this live, go ahead and share it with a friend, like or share it with a friend. If you're interested in attending the event on Tuesday, April the 28th at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, go ahead and just put Spark below, and then I will send you the details and the information for that. So have a great day. I will actually do a post. I'll be doing a live tomorrow, and tomorrow's live will be, why are you having those afternoon crashes? So if you're interested in that, go ahead and show up. If you have a friend that'd be interested in that, go ahead and share. So I'll see you tomorrow.